So, we have officially reached that point in my life where I was living at the time where vinyl was no longer an option for me. Both stores in town, Lancaster, Ohio, Buzzard's Nest was long out of business by this point, and both Recordtown and National Record Mart at the River Valley Mall ceased carrying vinyl in late 1988, replacing it only with CDs and cassettes. Even the 45s were impossible to find. They had some, National Record Mart had a selection of 45s, but only oldies titles. They had everything else on current stuff on cassette single and CD. So doing this year was a scramble, and I didn't come up with 10. I have more than what I'm going to show, not much more, and the ones I am not showing are not stuff I would want to put on this list because they're not the best or my favorites from that year. But of the vinyl that I have, these are. There's not a full list of 10, there's only 8 of them, but they are good, and 90% of them I've purchased since joining the vinyl community on vinyl. I found them in bargain bins, I found them on Discogs. Some of them I've had on CD for quite a while, but not on vinyl. We'll talk more about that as we get into it all the way. The year was 1989. I'm TC Kirkham, and this is the Season 1 finale of Vinyl Recall. Hey everybody, welcome to Vinyl Recall. I'm TC Kirkham, the original pop music guru of the vinyl community. Going to be showing you some albums from the year 1989. Now here it is, here's the whole list. I own 13 albums on vinyl from 1989. 5 of them are not albums, well, some of those are actually 12-inch singles, and the other 2 albums I don't put on this list because I don't consider them my favorites. I bought them recently, I played them once or twice, they're not that great, and I didn't want to add them. So I picked the top 8 that I have, and some of these I've had for years on CD. In fact, all my favorite stuff from this year I have on CD, but only on CD. Well, actually, that's not true. DC Talk's debut album, DC Talk, I have on cassette. I had on cassette. I have on digital now. I don't know if I ever picked up the CD or not. I believe I did. My favorite album of the year would still be what's going to be number 1 on this list, but a close second would be Ray Lynch's No Blue Thing. For those of you who don't know Ray Lynch, he's a new age keyboardist, and I loved his album, but again, I only have the CD. There's also Electric Youth by Debbie Gibson, Repeat Offender by Richard Marx, and Flying in a Blue Dream by Joe Satriani. 2 of those I have on CD, the Satriani I have only on digital. So, I do have 8 albums, most of which I have picked up in the last 3 years, because my vinyl community anniversary is this month. I've been part of the vinyl community for 3 years this month. Most of these I picked up recently. And it's not that I didn't have something from it already. And in fact, like I said, I had several of these on CD. But 2 of them are original purchases from back then. And we'll go over those as well. So let's get started because it is a shorter list and I want to make sure I explain why I like each one of these. Number 8. Nobody likes this woman. I'm beginning to think I'm the only fan of this woman in the VC, which is fine. The VC mostly made up of, metal heads and death metal heads and jazz heads and stuff. Not a lot of people have nice things to say about her. I agree with you when it comes to her acting skills, but her vocal skills are incredible. I picked this up about a year and a half ago for $3.99 at my local Savers. It was in amazing shape. It had only been played a couple of times. And while she had no hits from this album, it is really, really good. Number 8 from 1989. Pia Z from Pia Zadora. This album features Heartbeat of Love, I Want to Be Your Woman, Keep Me Inside Your Love, You Made Me Want You, which I love her cover of that, and Slam It, Eternally, If You Were Mine, I Am What I Am, Floating Hearts, and Katy, K-A-D-Y. Now, Pia had her last hit on the chart, 1985, I think, 84 or 85, when she had a lower reaches of the Hot 100 hit with Jermaine Jackson with a song called When the Rain Begins to Fall, which came from a movie, I think it was a movie called Invasion of the Ant-Men? I don't remember. It was a sci-fi comedy. This is on CBS Associated. It is in pristine shape, no inner sleeve. I was blown away by this album when I listened to it. Yes, if you guys don't like it, if you think it's crap, that's fine. Pia is a marvelous vocalist, and she's got some stuff with symphonies that are amazing. I agree with you about her acting skills. I've never been a fan of hers as an actress. I've never sat through The Lonely Lady or Butterfly, but I've seen her in other places, and I've also seen her in Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. Everybody's seen her in Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, or nearly everybody has. And she wasn't that good back then. So, but as a vocalist, I think she's awesome, and I always will. Number 8, Pia Z from Pia Zadora. Number 7, I had the single by this band, and when it became available to me, I believe I bought it from Adam at Record Crate. I bought the album. I think it was, well, actually, no. Maybe I got this in the cutout bin because there's no Record Crate price sticker on it. Usually there would be. But I do love this album, and it's your typical late 80s, early 90s hair metal type stuff. I like hair metal. I'm not a big classic metal fan like Black Sabbath and Pink Floyd, progressive rock. I do like the hair metal era, and I like a lot of the bands in the hair metal, although my wife is a lot bigger fan of them. But this one, they never really got thrown into that hair metal because they were more pop metal. They were along the lines of Def Leppard and Nelson in that area, who were more pop metal than true hair metal. And they were really good, and this album turned out to be as good as the single. Number 7, the album is called Last of the Runaways by Giant. This was a bet of a supergroup. Dan Huff, Alan Pasqua, David Huff, and Mike Brigadello make up the band here. And, of course, this had their big hit, I'll See You in My Dreams, which I think peaked at somewhere in the 20s on the chart, if I'm not mistaken, along with I'm a Believer, Innocent Days, I Can't Get Close Enough, No Way Out, Shake Me Up, It Takes Two, Stranger to Me, Hold Back the Night, Levy, Love, Welcome Home, and The Big Pitch. Man, I can't see even with my glasses on. They were on A&M, and they were really given the shaft. There were so many bands like them that got the shaft in the 80s. Jafria had one major hit. I love them. Giant, GTR, all these bands that had known people. Dan Huff was a known session player, also a known contemporary Christian artist. And the album didn't do that well, obviously, but it is really great, and it's a good, fun, pop hair metal album, I guess you would put it. Giant and Last of the Runaways, number 7 for 1989. Number 6 is an album I did have at the time. I got it from Columbia House, and sadly, it came out right after or right before he suddenly passed away of a heart attack and I think he was in his late 40s or early 50s. He was an amazing performer, and it was so nice to see him get back on the charts again in the late 80s with a comeback album like this, and with hits that would also later become hits for other people. And that was really terrific as well. Album is fantastic, and it deserved to be enshrined as one of the best of the year. Number 6 on my list for 1989, the comeback album from Roy Orbison, Mystery Girl. This includes his hit singles You Got It, and what's the other one? In the Real World. I know there was another single off here. Dream You, I Love So Beautiful, California Blue, She's a Mystery to Me, The Comedians, The Only One, Windsurfer, and Careless Heart. On Geffen Records, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check here. No, on Virgin Records. I'm sorry. I don't know why I thought that was on Geffen. Yeah, it is on Virgin. This came from Columbia House. I received it shortly after he passed away. I had been wanting to get it up to that point. And, of course, You Got It brought him back to the top 20, I think, at the time. And it was really nice to see him again after he had been part of the Traveling Wilburys. And I really think that we lost him so young, and such a tragedy, because he would have rebounded in a big way, similar to the way that Johnny Cash did with his American Recordings albums. I think Roy Orbison was always fantastic, even back in the day when he was having all of his big hits with like Pretty Woman and all those. This album is phenomenally good, excuse me, and you definitely, if you've not heard it, should seek it out and check it out. Mystery Girl, 1989, number 6, Roy Orbison. Number 5, I have had on CD since it came out, but I only picked up the vinyl this last year when it was reissued for Record Store Day 2022. It was limited release, and I have always loved the man associated with this band. I have been a follower of his since he had his own band in the early part of the 80s. I have followed his career throughout the 80s, throughout the 90s, up to the present day. He's released some amazing solo albums, and eventually we will get to him on Influencers, because he is just, vocally, the man can do no wrong for me. This was the first album that the band put out, and it wasn't the big hit that the second album would become a year later, thanks to its monster hit To Be With You. But this one is still good and deserves some attention. Really, you can't go wrong with a singer like Eric Martin. Number 5, Mr. Big's debut album. As I said, this is the Record Store Day reissue from 2022. My copy is 1087 of 3800, as the seal says there. I also picked up Lean Into It, which is the second album, which has To Be With You on it. This album has Addicted to That Rush, Wind Me Up, Merciless, Had Enough, Blame It on My Youth, Take a Walk, Big Love, How Can You Do What You Do, Anything for You, and Rock and Roll Over. Of course, Pat Torpey, Billy Sheehan, and Paul Gilbert with him at the same time, all with the band throughout until Torpey passed away, I believe, a few years ago. I'm not going to take it out of the sleeve because this is one of those sealed sleeves, but it is on 180 gram blue vinyl. Really cool album, great sounding. I've loved it since it came out. Eric Martin is one of my favorite vocalists of all time. I first heard him when the Eric Martin Band album came out. He was around before that, but that album didn't go anywhere, and he released a couple of solo albums in between the time that album was out and the Mr. Big stuff started coming out. And in between gigs with Mr. Big, who have taken hiatuses for several years, although they've continued to release music over the years, he's released some incredible solo stuff, including an album called Timeless in, I think it was 2003 or 2004. It was Eric covering some of the greatest hits of all time, mostly acoustically. His version of Superstar, the Leon Russell song, blows my mind, as does his version of Eternal Flame by the Bangles. I also dig his cover of My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. That album, Timeless, one of my favorites. We'll talk about it when we get to that eventually. But he is just awesome, and one of the reasons why I like Mr. Big a lot. Number 5, Mr. Big by Mr. Big. Number 4, let me grab a drink real quick. My throat's getting a little bit parched here. Number 4 is an artist I didn't care for at the time this album originally came out. I picked this up at an auction in 2021, I believe. I'd have to check the card. But her earlier stuff I was never really enamored with at the beginning. But when 1991's Ingenue came out, I fell head over heels in love with her voice, and I did go back and check stuff out on streaming when it became available. And wow, I really didn't know what I was missing at that time, obviously, because this album is phenomenal. And it's still that whole, at the time she was kind of a country punk twang sound. But I'll tell you something. It's amazing, and she's amazing. She remains one of my all-time favorite artists, and always will. From 1989, this was the debut album from Katie Lang and the Recline's Absolute Torch and Twang. This copy comes from the Coleman collection. Coleman was a friend of Mazzy, Norman Masloff, and when he passed away, he purchased Coleman's collection to auction off for him, as they had arranged. I picked up his entire Katie Lang set, which includes this, Shadowland, 2 different versions of Ingenue, and I think there's one other one. It's pretty cool. This album includes, and I'm going to try and read it all here, because I'm going to read it off the album because it's easier. She was on Sire Records, which I didn't even realize. Let me do that so you can see the label. Look in My Eyes, 3 Days. Good Lord, the print's still small. Trail of Broken Hearts, Big Boned Gal, Didn't I, Wildflower Waltz, Full Moon, Full of Love, Pulling Back the Reins, Big Love, It's Me, Walking In and Out of Your Arms, and Nowhere to Stand. As I said, it's absolute torch and twang is a good way to put it. There's a little bit of torchiness here. There's a lot of country punk pop here. Lang's vocals, as always, are stellar. And I had never really explored this album until 2000, whenever streaming really got hot, when I first got Spotify. This woman is amazing, and I will always love her. Number 4, Katie Lang and the Recline's Absolute Torch and Twang. This is going to be what some of the vinyl community are going to say is pure garbage, pure rubbish. But I love it. I always did. And this fits into my new age mindset at the time. I was, by 1989, I was fully into new age music. I was buying CDs of it. I was begging promos from it, from my friends at the record stores of it, because they didn't want to play them and they wanted to get rid of them. I ended up with a lot of free promos. And throughout my years with Coconuts, I really ramped up my purchases with Transworld, with Coconuts, Recordtown, Tape World, the different places I worked. This kind of plays into that because the music is very soft. It's very ethereal, and it's actually an undercoating for the poetry stylings of Ron Perlman in the character he was best known for playing. It also provided a beautiful song that became a Kirkham Report hit in 1990, and I was a huge fan of the original show, and I'm a huge fan of this album as a result. Number 3 for 1989, Of Love and Hope, Beauty and the Beast. Poetry stylings from Ron Perlman, along with music. Produced and directed by Artie Ripp and Ron Koslow. Vocals on The First Time I Love Forever were performed by Lisa Angel, or Angeli, with lyrics by Melanie, which I didn't know until recently. And of course, it used the music score from the series, written by Lee Holdridge and Don Davis. These are classic poems for the most part. I don't think, maybe 1 or 2 were written for the album. Here's the poetry that was included on the album. Ron Perlman in character as Vincent, and it was on Capitol Records. Played this to death. Played it to death. At the time, I was working a convenience store, and was that what? Yes, I was at that time. And I brought it with me one night when I was working second shift, and the person with me was like, "What the hell have you put on the tape machine?" And then they listened to it, and they're like, I want a copy. Can you make me one? Yeah, I did. It was, it's really amazing. It's along the lines of Wales Alive, which is another album I have featuring whale songs and poetry read by Leonard Nimoy. Very much like that, too. Love stuff like that. Number 3, Of Love and Hope, Beauty and the Beast, Ron Perlman, and other contributing artists. Number 2. This guy came in 1989 and took over the Kirkham Report chart. He had a two number one singles. One of those two number one songs became the number one song of the year on the Kirkham Report, 1989. Kirkham Report figures its year-end charts based on weeks on the chart before peak position, the same way Billboard does. So it spent 2 weeks, I think, or 3 weeks at number one. We'll find out when we get to it on Flashback Flicks, Flashback Tracks, a few weeks. But this was the only big hit album he had. He never really did anything else. The album did well. He had one. The song I loved was not a major pop hit. It did do pretty well on the R&B chart. But the first single I actually played recently. Kim is a fan of it, and she doesn't normally like this kind of music, but she liked that first single, which I played for her on Obscuria a few weeks ago. And it's the only album I think I have on the 4th and Broadway label, and it's fantastic. Number 2 for 1989, and again, this is an album I just recently picked up, I believe, again from Adam at Record Crate. Dino, 24/7. This features the opening, No More Heartbreak, I Like It, first big single. No, Never Too Much of You, Summer Girls, Boyfriend, Girlfriend, Real Love, the title track, 24/7, which was the number one song of the year on the Kirkham Report, 1989. Sunshine and In the City, 4th and Broadway Records, as I said. Dino was primarily a performer, but he's also a producer. He's still around, still involved in music. I was always surprised that he never did better. This is a great album. It's dance pop, 24/7, top-notch ballad, really good stuff. And I wish it had done better for him overall, because I really think the man deserved better than he got. Number 2, 24/7 from Dino. Sitting at number 1 for 1989, I've had this album on CD since the day it came out. No, I take that back. I had to buy it on cassette at first because they didn't have the CD. I went ahead and bought the cassette, and then 2 weeks later I picked up the CD. They didn't have the vinyl. The vinyl is something I recently picked up, and this was in a cutout bin, I'm pretty sure. It wasn't from Adam. I got it from somewhere recently, within the last 5 years. I picked it up maybe in town or somewhere. And I always thought that this album got the total shaft by radio. It came out at the tail end of all the teen pop going on in 1989. Debbie Gibson, Tiffany, New Kids on the Block, Tommy Page, Glenn Medeiros, all of them were doing well. And this came out at the back end of that and ran into the backlash that started happening in early 1990, which really took them all out. New Kids and Debbie would have a couple more hits, but everybody else was long gone. And this didn't deserve that. This kid cut his chops on Broadway, and it is just vocally superior to damn near everything else that came out except Glenn Medeiros, where it is the equal of that. And the album was one of my favorites of the whole decade, and probably of all time, because he's just got the smoothest voice. He wouldn't release another album until the 2000s, when he was on ER, for God's sake. And it's a great album, too. He's just fantastic, and he deserved better than he got. My number 1 album for 1989, the self-titled debut from actor and singer Scott Grimes. This album features You're the Voice, You've Got a Friend, Show Me the Way to Your Heart, Call on Me, What Am I Gonna Say, I Don't Even Mind, You Belong to Me, Only Love, Pressure Down, Walking on the Water, and Chance in a Million. He does dance pop here, he does ballads, he does in-between songs. His cover of John Farnham's You're the Voice is fantastic. But Show Me the Way to Your Heart, which was the first single, right up there with the best stuff from Medeiros and Gibson, as the ballad didn't even chart. What really sucks, this album was produced by the one and only Richard Carpenter. Richard featured Scott on his solo album Time in 1986. where he performed a song called That's What I Believe. Scott was at the time, I think, 13 or 14. And Scott has gone on to a continued acting and singing career, A&M Records. He did release a great concept album on CD. I believe it came out in 2008 or 2009. He was on ER at the time. Album called Living on the Run. Absolutely fantastic. Still has the same sounding voice almost 20 years later. And he's an amazing performer. And if you have never heard this, you might want to seek it out because, as I said, you had so many teen acts out then. You had Debbie Gibson, you had Tiffany, you had New Kids on the Block, you had Tommy Page, you had Glenn Medeiros. There are probably 7 or 8 more that I'm missing off the top of my head. He was better than everybody except maybe Glenn Medeiros. He could carry a tune. He could solidly write a tune. He co-wrote a couple of the songs. He was great. And the album deserved better than it got. My number 1 album for 1989, Scott Grimes by Scott Grimes. Let me run up my top 8 again. Number 8, Pia Z by Pia Zadora. Number 7, Last of the Runaways by Giant. Number 6, Mystery Girl, Roy Orbison. Number 5, Mr. Big by Mr. Big. Number 4, Absolute Torch and Twang, Katie Lang and the Reclines. Number 3, Of Love and Hope, Beauty and the Beast from Ron Perlman and the cast of that show. Number 2, 24/7 by Dino. And number 1, Scott Grimes by Scott Grimes. Now, as I said at the beginning of the show, this is the season finale. I'll be taking some time off, and the second season of this show will premiere probably in October, maybe September, we'll see. But there's going to have to be a change, people. I no longer had access to vinyl. Now, I've picked up, in this vast collection of mine, I have picked up some of these. I mean, like I said, I just got the Dino album recently. I only had the singles, and I had the digital. I didn't have even the CD. But only a couple of these I've had all this time on vinyl. The Beauty and the Beast and Scott Grimes from the late 90s. And the Roy Orbison I've had for years. But the rest I just picked up recently. And the reason was because Lancaster was completely vinyl desolate. They had no vinyl at any of the record stores. And then when I moved to Massachusetts, nobody carried vinyl unless you went to a used store, and occasionally I would pick up stuff, but nothing along the lines of anything major because I was fully into CDs and Kim was fully into cassettes, so we didn't really have that much vinyl coming in. So when this show comes back, it was going to morph from Vinyl Rewind to Music Rewind, and we will be covering CDs and tapes as well as vinyl, the top 10 albums of each year according to me. And that will start season 2 with 1990. That's when everything else changed. And it was a change for the better, but it was also a change for the worse. I love vinyl. I always have loved vinyl. But vinyl became an impossibility for me for about 30 years. I gravitated towards CDs because they sounded better and they were easier to take care of and easier to play. And then, at the end of the 90s, I gravitated to digital only for 20 years because CDs were outrageously expensive compared to what I was making. When I could grab an album for $3.99 on Amazon, you damn right I was going to do that. So, things changed up. Now, I have gotten back into vinyl. I have found vinyl. I've had featured some vinyl I've found over the years on these episodes that I've discovered since then. And there is a lot more to come. But as I said, I can't distinctly have just vinyl anymore. If anyone out there does collect just vinyl, that's great. I'm really happy for you. But I think most people do also have CDs and tapes, and some of us have digital. Now, I won't be including digital in the future. If I don't have it on a physical medium, I'm not going to include it. That's not fair. Because most people in the vinyl community don't approve of digital-only stuff, which is really sad because you're missing so much great music that is only coming out on digital. But that's your choice. Make your own kind of music. That's what they say. So it's not my choice. I choose to listen to it. But I will be including CDs and tapes starting with Season 2. And that will pick up, as I said, sometime in September or October. And until then, you'll see a variety of things on Wednesdays, and I hope you'll enjoy what you see. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I hope you will. If you have, thank you very much. I much appreciate it. Since you have subscribed, please share out to your to your friends who love music on your social media, and please leave a comment. I can't know how I'm doing without your comments, and I truly enjoy listening to them. I have been working hard to answer comments the same day they come in. Over the last month or so, I've missed a couple here and there, but I'm getting very much better at it, and I hope that I will continue to get much better at it, because I know people appreciate answers to their comments, and I'm always looking to make new friends. So I hope that you will join us, and do so. Join me when Season 2 commences in a couple of months, and for all my other shows as well. But until then, for Vinyl Recall, I'm T.C. Kirkham, TKR Video Central and the Kirkham Report. I'll see you around the interwebs. Ciao, baby.